Welcome to Top 5, a show where we count things down from number 5 all the way to number 1. And this week when I was picking the topic, I was like, I'm just going to pick a random year. 1997. Surely there were no good movies released in 1997. And then I looked at the list and I was like, holy crap, there are a lot of good movies released in 1997. So this week on the show, our top 5 movies of 1997. No Rodrigo this week, but Matthew is here. Matthew, what do you have for your number 5?
See, I had exactly the opposite reaction when you said 1997. I'm like, oh, there should be plenty of great movies in 1997. And then I went and I was like, oh, no, wait, there aren't movies that I enjoyed in 1997, or at least not as many. So I had to dig and dig and dig. But I finally found my number 5. Caveat, not a good movie, but one of my favorite movies, my number 5 movie, Turbo, a Power Rangers movie, which is the second film outing for the Power Rangers. And this should be very, very important. If you're listening right now, I want you to know this is the only Power Rangers movie that is canonical to the Power Rangers television series. So this happened, sort of. But Power Rangers Turbo has a couple of things going for it. Turbo, a Power Rangers movie, does feature the original squad, including the return of Red Ranger Austin St. John, Jason, who went off to the peace conference and came back because he realized, oh, wait, apparently I'm not a hugely bankable male lead man. I'm just a kid from a TV show. It's pretty okay. A lot of people who remember this movie remember it because of the Blue Ranger, who was an 11-year-old boy who would then morph into a full-size Ranger man. And I believe what most of them call that is the point where it was all ruined. But it is also one of the only film outings for Paul Schreier, who played Bulk. So that right there, I mean, Bulk gets money every time this film airs, which is like 3 times a year, probably on the Crackle channel or something. But if you have, 99 minutes to kill and you don't really have anything really pressing, you could do worse. I mean, some of the effects are pretty cool. Power Rangers, Turbo rather, a Power Rangers movie is my number 5.
Cool. My number 5 is Starship Troopers. Starship Troopers, when it came out, was not well received. I loved it because it's like, look at all the CG. A lot of this stuff was being developed on New Tech Systems and then on Maya and a bunch of other stuff. And I was just all into the CG stuff and what they could do in 1997. Really big on that. A lot of people didn't like the movie because they thought that it was promoting fascism, right? And this is where you have to take a step back and you have to really look at the state of the world in which we live in 2025 and understand that the reason why the world in which we live in 2025 is the way it is because people lack something called media literacy. And if people understood this concept of media literacy, they would understand that Paul Verhoeven, who grew up in a country that was fascist during World War II, you would know that he's not saying fascism is good and look how powerful we are as the world against the bugs, these horrible monsters. He's making fun of. He is satirizing fascism. He's showing, just like in RoboCop, where I'd buy that for $1 and everyone's overwhelming infatuation with everything television, that they would understand that he's making social commentary. And if you would open up your brain and see it for what it is, you would understand that. But we don't teach enough media literacy. Starship Troopers didn't do well at the box office when it was initially released. But it was later, people discovered it and said, oh, no, wait, I understand what's going on. I see what's going on, mainly because a lot of other people had to explain it. And then those people were like, oh, yes, I will also act like I'm smart and go on the internet and create a YouTube video that says Starship Troopers isn't supporting fascism. It's making fun of it. And so that's why my number 5 is Starship Troopers.
That's
because
an
media
interesting
literacy.
Verhoeven. Yeah. Verhoeven is one of those people where, honestly, I'm not saying that people aren't dumb, but he really puts a high level kind of bar to get into. You don't walk into like RoboCop and go, "Oh, this is a parody." I did not really get RoboCop until many years after I
Oh,
saw it,
that the fact
and
that
even now.
he was pointing out that in America, in Detroit, the
Mhm,
over hyper violence and the
mhm.
willingness of the police to just make a
Yep.
no questions asked police officer isn't satire.
The militarization of the
Yeah.
police and the Jesus metaphor, the literal walking on water. There's a lot of stuff in there, but yeah, Verhoeven's one of those guys where you're just like, ma, ooh, which
Yeah.
in a roundabout way, aside from the stupid noises, brings us to my number four, another director who is often I don't want to say misunderstood, but definitely misinterpreted in his work. Another very 90s director who has done something different. And it's I don't want to say it's a good movie, but it's not a bad movie. No, my number four is Chasing Amy, which is Kevin Smith trying to go mainstream. Not even necessarily trying to sell out, but trying to deliver a more traditional, kind of a romantic movie narrative that gets undermined by the fact that he's Kevin Smith. And honestly, the fact that, the movie, there are some very problematic things in here 30 years down the line as regarding the LGBTQIA community, but most importantly, it does have a main character who is clearly bisexual. Everybody insists on telling her that she's either a lesbian or that she's no longer a lesbian, like she can't be both. But it's an interesting film, and it does take a lot of, character actors and put them in roles that you wouldn't expect. It's kind of the point where Ben Affleck transitions out of blockheaded idiot roles into something really cool, into something different. Joey Lauren Adams is always, the whiny faced booby girl, and in here she gets to be a relatively nuanced character. She gets to be somebody kind of complex, and we even see that Jason Lee, for perhaps the first time, can act. And I really think that there's a lot to be said for this movie if you can get past a lot of Kevin Smithing. But it has the best Silent Bob dialogue in the history of all of the View Askew universe movies. And I feel like everybody in my house hates when I watch it, but every time I watch it, I do have these moments where I can kind of reconnect with 1997, kind of reconnect with that part of me that, like Kevin Smith, was in my 20s, that was kind of trying to figure out the universe, interacting with things that you didn't understand. It's a solid B plus. And I think that as Kevin Smith movies go, someday when people actually look at this and say, hey, Kevin Smith made a lot of stuff, how much of it was really good? I feel like they're going to rescue a lot of the negative parts, or rather, rescue Chasing Amy in spite of a lot of the negative parts, and, take into account those positive bits of the film. Again, I like it. A lot of people do not. 113 minutes of your life. How could you go wrong?
Yeah. There you go. My number four. I am always surprised when I watch a movie that I like. And again, I do not typically read comic books, read books, watch movies based on who the author, the director, or the artist are, right?
Mhm.
If I see a book title that sounds really cool, I'll pick it up and I'll start reading it. And then I'll realize, oh, here is somebody that has written other books that I liked before, or I will read it based on the back cover and find a new writer that I enjoy. Same way with movies. If the movie sounds good, I
Mhm.
will typically sit down and watch it, whether that is Fight Club or Zodiac or The Social Network or The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo or Mank or The Killer. When I sit down and watch these, I'm like, wow, this was really good. Who's the director on this? And each and every time it turns out to be David Fincher, which brings us to 1997's The Game. In 1997, this was a mind F of a movie in that our hero, played by Michael Douglas, is bored with his life. He's been divorced. He's kind of by himself. It's been a couple of years, and he's just trying to, he's getting ready to hit that real midlife crisis. And his brother, Sean Penn, who's kind of a dropout and a druggie and has problems. He's not the rich and famous, Michael Douglas character. He's Michael Douglas character's poor brother. But he's like, oh, you got to go and participate in this thing called a game. And the idea behind the game is it is an event that tests you mentally, physically, but it's always a game. The thing is, you don't know when the game is being played, and you don't know what the point of the game is. And suddenly, what Michael Douglas's character goes through is, why are people harassing me? What is going on? It turns into this really kind of weird mystery thriller of trying to figure out who is screwing with my life. I want it to stop. And then it ends with Michael Douglas kind of having to come to grips, not Michael Douglas, but the character that he plays, Nicholas Van Horton, having to come to grips with his father who jumped off a building and committed suicide at the same age that Michael Douglas's character is turning. And so Michael Douglas's character is feeling a lot of this remorse and a lot of this, am I becoming my father so much that I'm going to jump off the building? And sure enough, at the end of the movie, Michael Douglas's character does jump off the top of a very tall building. And then you get the curtain pulled back and you're like, holy cow. And then you spend the next couple of hours thinking and talking with the people that you've seen the movie with about, oh, well, if this was this, then this was also this. And oh my gosh, suddenly there's a lot of deep thinking going on into how this game was pulled off. Now, there are companies out there that try to do things like this. I don't think they do very well. I almost got Brad Will a couple of years ago with something like this where this company just starts sending you mysterious letters in the mail with clippings of newspapers from long ago. And every week you get a new one and it tells this mystery story, or in this case, it was a Lovecraftian horror story, until finally this relic arrives. And it's, that's the big payoff when it's like, oh, Steven Schleicher bought this gift for you. And it's this giant King in Yellow statue. And here's all the little things. And we hope you enjoyed playing this little game. The Game by David Fincher is 10 times those kinds of things. And if you haven't seen it, it is worth watching. Once you know that it is a David Fincher film, suddenly the artistic look and the, just everything about the directing, the composition, the lighting, the color scheme, everything, you suddenly go, oh, yeah, this is a David Fincher movie. But The Game from 1997 was really, really good. And that is why it is my number 4.
I have never seen that movie.
Yeah, you should. It's really good. It's a psychological thriller. So, it does deal with depression. It does deal with suicide. It certainly goes into the paranoia realm. So if those are things that trigger you, you probably shouldn't watch it. But it's good. It's a very decent, what is this? This is David Fincher's follow-up to Seven, right before Fight Club. So it's nestled right in there. So every 2 years he does a movie, almost 2 to 5 years. So this is right between Seven and Fight Club. And I think it's a very, very decent movie. All right. Let us get to our number 3s. And Matthew, what do you have for your number 3?
So as I joked at the beginning, 1997 is not a good year for me in terms of films. There aren't a lot of movies that I went through the list, and I didn't go through the whole year, but I went through a couple of hundred movies to try and see what resonated with me. And honestly, there weren't a whole lot. Now, that doesn't say anything about 1997 as much as it says about me, whether that be 26-year-old Matthew then or 54-year-old Matthew now. But one did pop out at me, and it made my list at number 3. And it made my list for a very important reason. But I have never seen it. And that movie is Ulee's Gold, starring Peter Fonda, directed by Victor Nunez. It is apparently the story of a widowed beekeeper going through his life trying to figure things out. But like fictional character Ted Mosby, I am a huge fan of crosswords. Used to be I would do the crosswords at work, to kill time in between tasks. And one thing that you will find, especially if you do the New York Times crossword over and over and over, is this movie is constantly referenced because of the vowels. There aren't a whole lot of words in the universe that are 4 letters long that contain 3 vowels and an L, which anybody who watches Wheel of Fortune will tell you is one of the most common consonants in the English language. So I know nothing about Yuli's Gold, and yet it is a constant reference point in my brain. And if you say to me, it's that drama with Peter Fonda, I'd be like, oh, is it Yuli's Gold? And people will say, yes, why do you know that? And I will say, because of the vowels. And so that is why my number 3 1997 movie is Yuli's Gold from
There are
1997.
there are so many movies released in 1997. Titanic, Jurassic Park, Part 2, so many others. And you pick a movie that you've never seen as your number 3 of all places.
That is correct.
My number 3 is definitely a movie I've seen. Definitely a movie I've seen multiple times. When people ask, hey, name a movie that you've seen more than 5 times, I say, tell me a movie that is brand new that came out this week, and I probably haven't seen it 5 times. I've seen so many movies more than 5 times, and my number 3 is definitely one that I've seen more than 5 times because I love the detective tale. I love L.A. noir. L.A. noir is a subgenre of noir detectives. L.A. noir is stuff that obviously takes place in Los Angeles, and one of the best writers of L.A. noir, besides your Sam Spades and your all those, James Ellroy, and he has his L.A. Quartet, which 2 of his books have been turned into movies. The first being The Black Dahlia, but the one that got Oscar nominations left and right was a big blockbuster. I think it had a $38 million budget for a period piece set in the 1950s. And brought in $126 million. I'm talking about L.A. Confidential with Guy Pearce and Russell Crowe, a couple of cops who are trying to figure out what the heck is going on and the corruption that is going on in 1953's Los Angeles police, service, and has to do with ladies of the night who look like starlets and bribery and mobsters and cops on the take. And, Ellroy draws a lot from real life. And certainly there are elements of this that are really drawn from true events. But the fact that when people say, why is Los Angeles police force so corrupt? You can look at a movie like L.A. Confidential, which is a work of fiction, but all of the trappings of what makes that movie work are the real life events that made corruption in Los Angeles a pretty common thing. The acting in this is so good. I think I had seen Guy Pearce in Momentum before L.A. Confidential. And I'm trying to think what else I may have seen him in before this. But both Guy Pearce and Russell Crowe are very young in this. This is before
this.
I don't know. This is certainly before the first Gladiator movie. It's got Kevin Spacey, which is, you're problematic, but then again, Kevin Spacey is a problematic character in this piece. Kim Basinger, right. Danny DeVito. It's got That'll Do Pig. Yeah, it's got That'll Do Pig in it. And it is just a great, I probably sit down and watch this about once every other year. I'm due for a rewatch of L.A. Confidential. I kind of wish that the L.A. Quartet, the Black Dahlia, the Big Nowhere, L.A. Confidential, and White Jazz, I wish all of those had been made into movies so that you could watch, because the characters in the L.A. Quartet are all throughout these 4 books. So, really? That'll Do Pig. You kind of follow his career through those books. And so it would be great to see that pop up. I haven't read White Jazz, but I've read the other 3 books and I enjoy them. There's also a second LA Quartet. And I read The Storm, which is the second in that series, which really messes you up because, again, the same characters from these movies show up in those books. And so you're like, where does this all take place? But it's fascinating. If you have not seen LA Confidential, you really should. It is a solid movie. It's well acted. It's got some great violence. And when I say great violence, I mean, there is a scene where Russell Crowe and Guy Pearce beat each other up in a records room. and it's great in just how well choreographed it is and just how out of control it feels. So LA Confidential, my number 3. What do
I
you
want to
have for
say
your number
Guy
2, Matthew?
Pearce. Guy Pearce was in Priscilla, Queen of the Desert before this, and that's the only thing that I
Oh,
know
really?
him from.
Okay.
Yeah. My number 2 was almost my number 1. And as often happens with top 5 for me, it really came down to kind of a back and forth of pros and cons. This is great. This is not so great. This is good. This is good. And so I ended up going with my number 1 as the movie that really resonated more with me. But number 2 is a 1997 film directed by Gus Van Sant, and it's really the debut of what we consider now the Ben Affleck and the Matt Damon. They'd been in other movies before Good Will Hunting, but before that, they never really, to me at least, registered as anything. They were like, Ben Affleck was the villain guy from Mallrats. He was just some guy. And I had no idea who Matt Damon was for like a long time. I believe it was probably Team America World Police. But I know he had been in like Mystic Pizza. He'd been in other stuff. But Good Will Hunting is the story of an incredibly brilliant, self taught math genius who accidentally, well, not accidentally, intentionally, but solves a puzzle, a theorem that a doctor had left on a board someplace while he was working at MIT cleaning the floors. At which point, the professor decides, well, this kid is too smart to clean floors. And he spends the whole movie trying to get Will Hunting to turn his life around and become what it is that that professor wants Will Hunting to be, which is what he would have been if he had that kind of brilliance. And where it really turns into a magical film is when Will gets assigned a therapist played by the late Robin Williams, bearded Robin Williams. So it's one of his sensitive pieces. You know that it's him being incredibly deep and thoughtful. And the two of them just sitting in a room. The majority of this film, at least the majority that I remember, is the two of them sitting in a room with Boston accents, talking about their lives, talking about things that happened, and just kind of going back and forth. But what sells it for me is that Will is this overbearing genius. He knows he's smarter than everybody, and he walks in expecting to be the smartest person in every room. And the first thing he says to Robin Williams is some remark about his late wife. And you see him, doing his smart facade and his little smirk. And in the background, you see Robin Williams just kind of take off his glasses and loosen his tie. And as soon as he turns around, Robin Williams grabs him by the neck, pins him to the wall, and he tells him, "Don't ever talk about my wife again, Chief, or I will end you." And at that point, you realize that these characters are more alike than any of us had ever suggested. And the movie goes places that I didn't expect. I was expecting a big time Hollywood production where he becomes, a genius. He's fascinated. Everybody loves him. And he ends up with Minnie Driver for some reason. And you go through the whole thing. It's not about that. And that makes this movie so much more fun and so much more entertaining. And I think more moving than anything that I would have expected. So if you ever want to hear Boston accents asking you how you like dem apples, but also being stuck in your feelings, definitely you want to check out Good Will Hunting.
All right, it's a good movie. Very good movie. I remember all of these movies I saw at the theater, except for the Power Rangers Turbo. 97, I went to the movies all the time. But the one that is on my number 2, kind of like yours, was almost my number 1. But I wanted to see this from the moment that person I knew came back and said, the title of this movie doesn't make any sense. It only shows up at the very beginning, and then it's dumb, and it's all about the porn industry. And I'm like, and you hated it, huh? I'm going to go see this movie. And it is definitely one of my all-time favorite movies. And it came out in 1997. I'm talking about Boogie Nights. Boogie Nights is a Paul Thomas Anderson movie. And this is probably where I kind of discovered Paul Thomas Anderson and then had to go down over the years, all of his stuff. Magnolia came out after
Mhm.
that, and then we have some of his other works. I went back and watched Hard Eight and Punch Drunk Love. I didn't really care for. There Will Be Blood is fantastic. The Master is fantastic. Inherent Vice is fantastic. I don't think I've seen Phantom Thread. Licorice Pizza is a little weird. And then he's got
Mhm.
one coming out this year that I'm looking forward to. Um, and it has, first of all, it's got Marky Mark in it.
Mark
And
Wahlberg.
yeah, Mark Wahlberg. And he is playing a fictionalized version of John Holmes. And if you don't know who John Holmes is, he's a man with a very large um, uh, unit that he
Mhm.
can use in the pornographic industry. And this takes place in the 1970s when porn was, well, late 60s, early 70s, and into the 80s, where it really takes a look at the evolution of porn and how porn and the change in the porn industry, specifically from film and into video, and how Dirk Diggler's attitude and the fact that he thinks he's got the biggest, uh, which he does,
Mhm.
how he thinks he can control and dictate everything in his life, and how he gets into drugs and it all comes crumbling down. You look at it from just the top level of here's this story that's being told. But then you start to dive deeper and you really discover that this film is about family and how family isn't necessarily the people who raised you or that you are raising, but it is people that find their community, their unit together, and how they watch out and take care of one another. Because even when Dirk Diggler, Mark Wahlberg's character, is at the absolute lowest part in his life, the Burt Reynolds character is there. Jackie Horn is there to, not Jackie Horn. He doesn't play Jackie. Um, Jackie Horn is the one that goes to jail for child pornography. Um, but he still welcomes him back into the fold, into their group, and it is really a from a character driven perspective. If you're just thinking that this is about boobies and wieners, yes, it has
Mhm.
that in there, but it is some of the best character development I've seen in film. Burt Reynolds didn't want to do this movie. He ended up doing it. They talked him into it. He hated the movie once he saw it and thought it was just going to be trash and it was going to ruin his career. And it was the movie that gave him his comeback for the last couple of years of his life. People are like, "What? Burt Reynolds is still alive? Oh my gosh, look how great he is in this movie." It's got Julianne Moore, fantastic. It's got Don Cheadle in it. It's got John C. Riley, maybe one of John C. Riley's early films. Same way with Philip Seymour Hoffman. It's the first time that I remember seeing Philip Seymour Hoffman in a movie. Nicole Parker, Heather Graham got a lot of attention from this film. William H Macy and so forth. Just a fabulous cast, fabulous directing. It's just doing some very cool things in a time period that I really like. And even though it may be a subject matter that a lot of people don't care for, and I think this is why the person that came out of the theater and told me, "Oh, this is just a trash movie," it's because he
Mhm.
didn't care for the subject matter that the story surrounded. But this is a good movie. But be aware, ladies and gentlemen, got a lot of wieners, got a lot of boobies, it's got a lot of nudity. If that is something that offends you, you definitely don't want to see this. But if you really like Paul Thomas Anderson, if you really like Philip Seymour Hoffman as a confused gay man, if you want to see Burt Reynolds being probably the best that Burt Reynolds is as an older guy, you definitely want to see Boogie Nights. And that's why it's at my number two.
I did like that one. I didn't like it enough to put on my list, but I did like that one.
We have now reached the top of our list. Matthew, what do you have for your number one?
When we go for a specific year, there is, as we've seen, that complex relationship, not just between you and the movies, which I think you and I share a lot because we have similar backgrounds. We have that same education, many of the same classes, but we have a different kind of interaction with the films. And where 26-year-old Stephen was going to the movies all the time, 26-year-old Matthew was not. 26-year-old Matthew, however, did appreciate a good, solid black comedy. And 26-year-old Matthew did love classic Saturday Night Live. And for some reason, the second appearance on my list of Minnie Driver in Grosse Pointe Blank, which is my number one film from 1997, it is really, really engrossing because, see what I did there? It stars John Cusack as a hitman. The hitman's name is Martin Blank, and he is supposed to assassinate someone in his hometown on the weekend of his high school reunion. And so he goes to do this hit that he doesn't necessarily know that he wants to do, but he also gets a chance to reconnect with the high school girlfriend that he sort of dumped when he freaked out, joined the army, and became a professional killer a decade earlier. And the movie, of course, every John Cusack movie has Jeremy Piven in it. This one has a really great Jeremy Piven moment. Hank Azaria is in it as an FBI agent who's following him around. The big tough guy who plays Lex Luthor now, Michael Cudlitz, is in this film, and he is one of the character's high school tormentors. He was the bully who always thought they had beef between them, and of course now he's a washed-up 35-year-old car salesman who's trying to write poetry. It really is a well put together, bleak but entertaining movie that starts with Martin coming home and finding that his house has been knocked down, his family is gone, and there's a mini mart where his house used to be that he ends up having to blow up. So it's like Chekhov's mini mart, really. But it also does feature a lot of really great movies. Movies? No, it features a lot of really great music, as most Cusack films do. Has The Clash, has English Beat. It has a whole bunch of John Cusack's favorite movies stuff, music's background, whatever. But I always love this movie for two reasons. One, because it's really fun. Otter and I watched it together and really kind of bonded over it. And two, our shared theory that Grosse Pointe Blank is what happened to Lloyd Dobler from Say Anything 10 years down the line. Say Anything from 1989 was 19-year-old John Cusack. Grosse Pointe Blank, nearly 10 years later, is 28-year-old John Cusack. And so if you look at those two movies as kind of a spectrum of this same guy, he was kind of a loser. He freaked out, joined the army, became a professional killer. It's kind of entertaining. Oh, Alan Arkin kills in this movie. Alan Arkin kills in every movie, but he just kills in Grosse Pointe Blank. If for no other reason, you need to watch this for Alan Arkin. And that's why it's my number one movie of 97.
Yeah, very good. Following up with my number one, this is, again, a heavy CGI film, but one I ended up taking my students to because it's like we were doing like an intro to motion pictures type class, and it's like, hey, you guys need to see a modern movie. We need to discuss it. We need to look at it from all aspects. How about we go and see The Fifth Element? I was blown away by The Fifth Element. I had never seen a Luc Besson movie before. And it was, it's, one could argue that even though this is an English release, even though it was released in the United States, it really very much is a French film.
Mm-hmm.
And it is about a great weapon that falls into the hand of Corbin Dallas, played by Bruce Willis, a taxi cab driver on Earth. And people have to figure out how to activate the weapon if they have any hope of saving Earth. So Corbin Dallas and Lilu are the two that have to figure it out. And it's a race across essentially the solar system and Earth, trying to put all the pieces together. Of course, it's got a great villain played by Gary Oldman, a little bit over the top. But the thing that sells this movie for me is, I talked about Fincher. We've had Seven. We've had The Matrix. We've had, maybe not The Matrix. The Matrix came out in 99 or something. But during the 90s, there was this period where everything started to get dark again, and color saturation is not quite there anymore. You see it in The Saint, you see it in the Batman and Robin movie, etc. But here, the colors are brilliant, like oversaturated colors. Like Lilu's hair is that particular shade of orange because it has to be that shade of orange in order for it to pop against the screen. The crazy black goo that runs down Gary Oldman's forehead has to be that particular shade of black goo, so it stands out against his forehead. The entire New York cityscape that goes both up and down, very Mobius inspired in its design, has to be that way. And then the editing style in here is just fantastic. Don't forget, Chris Tucker is in this. And he just does a fantastic role as Ruby Rod. And just that whole sequence from the minute that they board that spaceship and the moment that Ruby Rod appears all the way through when they get off of the ship is just nonstop action. And the editing and the pacing and everything is just so good. I was blown away by that. It's definitely a big movie. It's definitely a big action piece movie. One can go in and look at different themes throughout the piece. And I know people have debated this. Some people don't like this movie anymore because of certain allegations that have come out against Luc Besson. I don't know what the current status of any of those are, but it is still a fantastic movie from fantastic people that worked on it. And if you haven't seen The Fifth Element, I mean, I don't know if it definitely wasn't the biggest movie of 1997 because that went to Titanic. But it is definitely up there as one of the best movies out of 1997. What did you put on your top 5 list for movies that came out in 1997? Well, there is an easy way for you to let us know. Find out in the Discord server. What'll we have next time? Oh, you will just have to tune in to find out what is on our top 5. Top 5 is a production of Major Spoilers Entertainment, LLC, and is produced by me, Steven Schleicher. If you have any suggestions or ideas for future top 5 topics, make sure you head over to our Discord server. Share your thoughts there.
This podcast is copyright 2025 by Major Spoilers Entertainment, LLC.